And that was one of my suggestions. So if you check out the Nightpan logo, it's the bird.
Gotcha. Hey
Yeah.
guys, it's Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. Tonight I am joined by a New York congressional congressional candidate from District 21. His name is Patrick Nelson. He's in a hotel right now, I'm guessing traveling for the campaign, because I'm going to mention this again, but New York does vote on the 26th of this month. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Patrick. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Patrick is, you guys know, I always say my favorite kind of candidates are Bernie delegates, because they're Bernie delegates turned Bernie-crats. And that's very exciting to me. Because it's, you guys are taking the revolution and moving it that much further. So you are endorsed by the People for Bernie. You are a Justice Dem. My question to Bernie delegates and people who were huge Bernie supporters is, why, after everything they did to us, why would you run Dem?
Okay. Well, I think so. The they is a big issue there too, because the Democratic Party, not to come across as an apologist, but it is, you have the leadership at the top. You had Debbie Wasserman Schultz. In the state of New York, we have Governor Cuomo and his. But there's a definite difference between the rank and file, folks that I work with in the local committees, folks in Stillwater and in the counties that work to elect local progressive candidates. And so at the bottom, there is this disconnect actually between the rank and file Democratic Party members and the leadership at the top. And there's a lot of dissension that you see there. There's a reason why Senator Sanders carried 65% of the Democrats in my district. And so I wanted to work with those folks to try and build a better Democratic Party. I think, it's how do you view the two-party system? But so long as we have a plurality voting system and a first past the post system, right, where it's winner take all, and you have the spoiler effect that's built in there, we have to change that. We need to move, like Maine has, to a ranked choice voting system so that we can have a real free market of ideas. But until we make that change, I think we're going to be most effective working within the existing power structures. And that means taking the party that is the closest to the ideals that I have and trying to make it more like, honestly, what the party used to be. This was the party of labor. This was the party of the original New Deal. It was the party of the original Medicare and the Great Society. And those roots are still there. And I think we have a reemergence. I didn't see Senator Sanders as an insurgent. I saw the third way Democrats that from the 90s on as the insurgency, the corporate Democrats, the folks that were favorable to business and were trying to be the centrist. They broke from what the tradition of the Democratic Party was going back to Franklin Roosevelt. And now we're trying to reclaim that history and that identity as the party of the working people, as the party of the Civil Rights Act, as the party of the Voting Rights Act. And, so I think that that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that on a more local level, I mean, of course, we all have Dems in our family and our friends, everything like that, and they're not, Pelosi or what have you. But while you would be working in your district, you would also have to work with the people who I'm describing. So, and I was you were there. I was there in July. So I'm just always interested to see, after as disenfranchised as we were, why people would still run Dem. A lot of us are Dem exit, but good for you, go with whatever works best. A lot of times people run Dem strategically. So I just get very curious why you would.
So to take your point there for a second, if you were to run third party, run independent, run as a green, and then you get to Washington, D.C., you're still going to have to pick a caucus. I mean, Senator Sanders is still, he's a member of the leadership in the Democratic Party in the Senate, effectively working with them. So if you were to come into D.C. as a Green or as an independent on the progressive side, you were going to have to choose a caucus, and you're going to have to work with people anyway. So I don't see that that's the case either way. If you are successful,
Bernard is an independent.
Yes,
Yeah.
But he's the outreach chair for the Senate Democrats. Mm-hmm. So he kind of plays that straddle position with one leg in, one leg out. And I think there's a lot of progress that can be made in that position. And that's kind of the model that I'm trying to emulate. Because at the end of the day, we have to put together in the House 218 votes to pass legislation. And it's about making the change that people want to see in their lives. It's about getting, HR 3671 passed, the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act. And there are folks there that we can work with. There's Ro Khanna, there's Raul Gafalga, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. We're losing Congressman Ellison, which is sad, but I hope he does well as Attorney General in Minnesota. So there are folks there that we can work with and to try and make the change. So I want to grow that caucus. I want to grow that area so that becomes the dominant force in the Democratic caucus. And so that's where I'm at.
Understood. And I'll mention this again, you guys, but speaking of Ro Khanna, he is coming back and joining me for a second time tomorrow. We are going to be discussing California, the election yesterday, and also his new FJG proposal. So anyway, I digress. You also went to several states to canvass for Bernie. Which is amazing. What made you so inspired to be that active?
Well, we finally had somebody that was talking, number one, not talking around the issues, but addressing the issues straight on. And one of the things that I got tired with, I think everybody has gotten tired with, is, sort of the Mitt Romney syndrome. He was kind of perfect at this. Actually, the congresswoman in my district, Elise Stefanik, is excellent at this. They come out of that classic political training where they say a whole bunch of words that mean nothing and they run out the time. And, Senator Sanders chose to use his time to advocate for positions and to shift the political dynamic. And it was also, I felt that, we were looking at a vacant Supreme Court seat, right? With the death of Justice Scalia, the inability to get Merrick Garland confirmed, and that seat was incredibly important. And Senator Sanders, with the energy that he was channeling and understanding how difficult it is to get the third term of the same party, I felt like channeling that insurgent energy, channeling that outsider, and somebody wasn't caught up in the previous establishment, gave us the best chance to get somebody into the White House that would have appointed a justice that would have defended a woman's right to choose, that would have worked to overturn Citizens United, and how important that was. So some of it was the policies were there, the economically sound policies that worked on investing in infrastructure, on moving to Medicare for all, on having tuition-free public college, addressing student debt, but also what he was doing, I think, offered those of us in the progressive movement the best chance of winning the general election in 2016. And, so it was both. People would go, well, we have to be strategic and, and vote for Secretary Clinton. And I'm like, you're not talking to the voters that I'm talking to. You're not living in the community that I live in. Our district was an Obama-Trump district. And I could see, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I had a feeling that, a lot of folks that I knew that had gone for President Obama were leaning towards a more anti-establishment energy in that era, in that election. And we needed to have someone from our side that could channel that energy.
Yeah, right on. You mentioned Citizens United. That's kind of a litmus test for all progressives, not taking corporate money. And you do have that on your platform. Can you discuss why you decided not to go that route, and why when you decided it?
Well, it's also important to note that the campaign finance system was broken way before Citizens United. And Citizens United made it easier. But corporate PACs have been around longer. Special interest PACs have been around longer. And the thing that I think we have to understand from the election side is that you cannot expect folks that benefit from a corrupt campaign finance system to then go to Washington, D.C. and overturn that corrupt campaign finance system. Those structures that put a person into power are those that person will invariably try to maintain. That means we have to cut ourselves off from that corrupting influence at the outset. And it matters in the campaign, and it matters when you get elected, because that's when the special interests really come. Once you get in office, they come after you with money because they want to give you money for re-election, for favors they want you to do today. And we're all human beings. And people like there's this misnomer. The congresswoman at her one of her town halls said about NRA money, "Oh, the money I take from donors doesn't influence my positions," and the entire room laughed. We know that's nonsense. You know, when you do something nice for me, psychologically speaking, I like you more, and I'm inclined to want to return that favor. Now, that's a function of human psychology. So if you allow yourself to take that favor from a special interest, you may think, well, I am a pure idealistic person, and I can take that money and not be influenced by it. But you're kidding yourself, because we're all subject to those same biases and influences. So the only way to rectify that problem is to not take those favors to begin with.
Absolutely. And speaking kind of along that line, I was going through your Facebook page, and you about 2 weeks ago, you launched a petition with fellow Justice Dems to demand the Democratic Party make Medicare for all a central part of their platform, essentially. How is that going? What response have you had? And also, what do you expect to happen from that?
I lost you a little bit there, but I think I got most of it. I haven't checked the petition in a few days, but at last I saw it was over 5,000 signatures. So that has, that shows that there's an emphasis behind it. I think it's a part of the broader issue of just showing the support for that and making the case to folks in the Democratic Party that this is not a niche issue for Democratic primaries. This is a winning issue for the general election. In our district, we have a lot of mixed households. We did a lot of door-to-door petitioning to get on the ballot. You talk to Republicans, you talk to conservatives, you talk to independents, and they push back on a lot of things like the minimum wage. But when you say, do you think everybody ought to have health care as a right? They go, yeah, that makes sense. They're starting to see the writing on the wall that we are fourth highest in the world in taxpayer spending on health care. For what we spend as taxpayers, pretty much every other country covers every one of their citizens as a right. We've got this huge mismanagement of our federal tax dollars, and fiscal conservatives that are paying attention understand that. I mean, we're at 57% of the country is there. If we lead on this issue, that will get us, that can put the Democratic Party back into power. And it's in line with who we are as a party, being the party of Social Security, being the party of the original Medicare, being the party of the New Deal and the Great Society. When Democrats were at their best, we did broad-based programs that were generally applicable. And I know that's a lot of words, but basically everybody paid into it and everybody benefited. One of the reasons the Affordable Care Act was less popular was a whole bunch of people paid in and then a whole bunch of people got care, but the entire set wasn't all people. And you can convince conservatives on Medicare for all because they can see themselves as part of the all. It's about them getting a better deal for themselves. It's about, managing the money responsibly. So, I mean, there's the old adage that if the Affordable Care Act had been single payer, Democrats would still be in power. And it's when we became this technocratic party of, nibbling around the edges of the power, don't shift the power structures too much. We're going to fix this little problem over there. We're going to fix this little problem over here. And we're going to stay away from root causes because that would be a radical move. We've become less popular, we've become less well-liked, and we've become less well understood than when we proposed policies that said, if you're over 65, you are guaranteed a dignified retirement in the United States. That's understandable, that's effective, and that wins elections, and it's also good policy.
Right on. I was mentioning Rose coming back tomorrow. When he was here prior, he was talking about a bill he created to get people in Congress not to accept money anymore from corporations, and a total of 6, including him, congressional people have signed it.
Yeah.
That's it. So that is 100% why the Democratic Party does not want Medicare for all. It's because of the money they get in big pharma and things like that. So, and I'm not trying to be a pessimist. I'm curious what outcome. I mean, over 5,000 signatures is amazing. But what do you see happening with that?
It's one tool in the toolbox. You know, it allows us to communicate with people, to organize. You know, we had done something similarly in our campaign on net neutrality that we're going to follow up on, supporting the Congressional Review Act resolution. We're going to be getting together a call list for, I think, this Friday of folks on the Energy and Commerce Committee and our Congresswoman and the Speaker to push them on that. I mean, it's one phone call usually doesn't change anything. I was a legislative staffer, and you know, you take one phone call, and in an assembly office, you get a little bit more of attention. But if you can add 10 calls, if you can add 100 calls, if you can add 1,000 calls, eventually the system does work. Honestly, through frustrated staffers going, good Lord, can we just do something about this? I'm sick of answering this call. Sometimes that's the way democracy works, and it is a slog. It does take a long time, but if we don't work towards it, it's never going to happen. So, you know, we have to keep pushing as much as we can. I did it in my own campaign in regards to corporate PAC money. I've challenged every one of my fellow Democratic candidates to refuse corporate PAC and lobbyist money. And we're down to 5 candidates, and myself and 2 others are on that. And we had to twist some arms, and we had to explain to people what corporate PACs were, why that influence was negative. We had actually gotten a few others that had since dropped out of the race, but we were up to as many as 4 or 5 candidates in the race that were towing the line on not taking corporate PAC money. That doesn't happen if we don't push for it at all. And that gives us, you know, I consider that a victory for our campaign.
Sure, so, absolutely.
So we
absolutely. And that's one of the beautiful things about so many progressives running, even the ones who didn't win yesterday, for example, they forced the other candidates to go more left because they saw people excited about the platforms of the other people and kind of knew that they'd have to adapt, you know. So that's, you know, right on. I saw on your website, it looks like you've been campaigning for over a year.
Almost 18 months.
Wow.
We announced the last day President Obama was still president.
Wow.
And, you know, we got out there, and, you know, it was important to start early because I came off the last congressional campaign. I was a staffer on it, and I understood what the first 100 days were going to mean. And I didn't want to see Elise Stefanik, who takes 55% of her campaign contributions from corporate PACs, okay, is one of her principal funders is Elliott Management, the Vulture Capital Fund run by Paul Singer. And I did not want to see this member of Congress in the era of President Trump going unchallenged. So I ran in part so that somebody would be out there in the media, on social media, knocking on people's doors and putting out the alternative argument to at least put some pressure and let the Congresswoman know that we're out there, we're looking at her, we're watching, and we will come in November. So that's why getting out there early I thought was so important. And also, incumbents start campaigning right away, right? Sure. You know, Congresswoman Stefanik was making donor calls, I will bet you, the day after she won re-election. So why should challengers wait and allow incumbents that additional advantage of time? So, yeah, we've been at it a while, and you know, I wasn't previously elected in office, so we needed to build name recognition, we needed to build relationships, and I feel like we've done a pretty good job doing that.
Yeah, I actually had a few of my viewers recommend you. That's how I heard about you. So, and they weren't in New York, so that's good. That's definitely good name recognition there. What can be done as far as election reform?
Okay.
We see, you know, even yesterday in California, 120,000 people disappear off voter rolls, you know, and I mean, it's kind of deja vu, essentially. New York also had a lot of problems. You guys have to register like 8 months in advance, which is absolutely ludicrous.
The state primaries, 11 months. The day.
That's abhorrent. That's ridiculous. And then you are closed primary as well, which is a lot of people don't even know all the candidates, 11 months in advance. And I'm in Pennsylvania. We have closed primaries as well. So what are you hoping to see, come June 26th? Are you going to have volunteers at the precincts to kind of watch, or because I suggest it, but
we have the right to do that, and we've looked into it. The challenge is I'm in a district of 12 counties, and there are as many as 10 to 15 towns in each of those counties, and they have as many as 8 polling sites to them. So our volunteers are going to be spending time turning voters out, are going to be spending time making the calls, and we are going to be in the position of trusting that the folks working in the local boards of elections and the poll watchers and the poll workers are going to ensure a process with integrity. I know the Brooklyn purge happened in the state of New York, and it was really disappointing, and I'm disappointed that there hasn't been more accountability for that. I haven't seen anything in upstate in the North Country to suggest that that's going on, and we haven't heard tell of that happening in our area. So maybe it's a regional thing, or I'm not sure, but we have to hope that folks are going to do their job. I know all the Democratic commissioners of elections and help their job, so that's kind of the nature of it. If you had the bodies to do that much poll watching, you have to choose where you're putting your resources. So we'd rather have them driving, rather have them making phone calls, and that sort of thing. If we had a smaller district, you try to do that because that's what you're supposed to do in the field program. Anyway, you're supposed to have the poll watcher there to cross your voters off, so you're not calling somebody that already voted. But right. We're not going to be in a position to do that. Now, as far as election reform, things that we need to do, right? We need automatic registration. Shouldn't have purges. Like, why we purge people from the voters' rolls? You don't vote for 10 years. Why should you lose your right to vote if you still live there? That all of these things are incumbency protection and party protection, right? The re-registration deadline in New York is so that you can't have an insurgent candidate that brings new people into the party that year and do it. That's one of the reasons we started early, and it was still difficult because people were going, that election's a year away. I've got time, and they're not even plugged into it. No matter how much you blast it on their Facebook feed, if they're not ready to receive that message, it can be ineffective. But we did the best we can. Re-registered a number of folks before the October 13th deadline, but not as many as we would like. And then we run into supporters who in May, they're like, oh, I'm so excited about your campaign, and I'm an independent. And I'm like, you can knock on doors, you can make phone calls. You can send us a check for $21 and be a small dollar donor to the campaign, but I'm so sorry that you can't vote. We launched a petition on our campaign to have the state Democratic Party open the primaries, because in New York, that is a party decision, not a legislative decision.
I see.
And the New York Progressive Action Network got that resolution introduced to the last state party convention, where it was tabled without debate. And that's just that's how it works in Governor Cuomo's Democratic Party. He's concerned about protecting his own power, I think, more than the betterment of the state of New York. And that's concerning because we should be, as a Democratic Party, Democratic is in the name. And we should be doing more to yield those to live up to those values. And we shouldn't have a Democratic Party in the state of New York that is complicit in voter suppression and that stands by the worst election laws in the country.
Absolutely. Do you have your headphones, the earbuds? I'm starting to hear myself echo now.
Oh, it's happening now.
Yeah, I haven't heard it till now.
No, I had a headset and then it went.
I got it. Yeah.
Here we go. Sorry about that. And that can be really frustrating. I was on radio show yesterday where that was happening in my own headset, and it was all kinds of distracting. So let's see. Oh, on this side. How's that?
Does that sound okay now with me talking?
Yeah, sounds great. How do I sound?
Okay, perfect. I don't hear an echo on myself anymore. Sorry about that, guys. It happens. But anyway, so you did mention as well student loan debt. So a lot of people I interview do have free college tuition, but it seems like not a lot of them talk about student loan debt for people who have already incurred it. Because that's, of course, a really huge problem. So what is your platform on both of those things?
Right. So it's a two-part problem, right? You have $1.4 trillion of outstanding student debt right now. And one of the things I like to say to people is that you don't have to be somebody in possession of that debt. You don't have to even know somebody that's in that debt, but you are being affected by that debt because it's cars that are not being purchased, it's homes that are not being purchased, it's weddings that are being delayed, put off, or not happening at all. It's lives that should be started that are starting later, and that has a direct economic impact. The Levi Institute had their study on student debt cancellation when they compared it to the so-called Tax Cut and Jobs Act and shown that, it would have been a much greater stimulus to the economy to go ahead and forgive student debt. So you have to deal with that part of it, and then it's how do we stop this from happening in the future? And we can't just deal with stopping the incurrence of massive student debt and then leave a generation saddled with a massive amount of basically an ambition tax, because it's lower income and middle income people that are suffering from that. It's not people whose parents can afford to pay, full college tuition. So I have a three-part. Forget parts. We need to look at bringing back dischargeability for student debt, so that if you do go into bankruptcy, you can discharge that just like you would credit card debt or any other unsecured debt. No one's going into bankruptcy because it's convenient, because of what that does to your credit score, not to mention just your own personal pride in yourself. It never feels good to say, I have to go into bankruptcy. I don't understand how people can be bankruptcy attorneys. It's got to be a tough work, because you're dealing with people at the end of the rope. So dischargeability, the reduction of interest rates. I still favor Senator Warren's proposal to tie it to the overnight window or the discount rate at the Federal Reserve. Basically, that rate at which we loan large financial institutions, we should loan to our students. And then I think we have to do some principal reduction up to full forgiveness, but it's a 25%, a 30%, a 50% principal reduction would be excellent for the economy. It would help people with massive outstanding debt. I've got $150,000 of it myself. Maybe that's the reason I'm not for blanket forgiveness, is I just don't want to be the congressional candidate that's running for everybody else to forgive their student debt. But I do think that there is a case to be made to reduce that overall burden that's existing on young people, on middle-class folks, and on the American economy. One of the things I think we can do in the 116th Congress, right, because we can have these big picture ideas and where we want to take the country, but we should also talk about, what is going to be feasible in this next Congress when you're going to have a Republican administration, you might have a Republican Senate, or you're going to have a Joe Manchin Democratic Senate, right? We might have a majority there, but we're still going to have some of those folks. And one of the things I find broad agreement on is we have student debt forgiveness for rural doctors, for lawyers that move to communities that need service, for nurse practitioners, for social workers. We need something for people who start new businesses, small businesses, entrepreneurs, especially in areas like my district, which is in need of new economic development, new jobs. We have a lot of vacant storefronts. That's one of the common themes you'll find in the North Country, is this shell of once vibrant economies, and there are these storefronts are just for rent signs that go for months or years at a time because nobody goes after it. So I was an entrepreneur. I started a business some years back, and I remember calling Sally Mae going, okay, here I am, supposedly, chasing that American dream that we all care about. Is there anything in here for me with my student loans? Nothing. And that is an incredibly, I think, moderate, sane, practical proposal. It's far short of what I would want to see done. But I think it is one step that we can take to address it that has a chance of actually being enacted in this next Congress. I'd like to take things much further. I intend to take things much further, but we're going to have to work with what we have. I hate saying that, but there it is.
So it's interesting. You brought up Levy, the Levy Institute. Is that the article that was written by Pavlina by chance? Do you remember who wrote the article?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh, the article you were talking about from the Levy Institute? Do you remember who wrote it?
Yes.
Was it Pavlina?
Connectivity.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep losing you.
I missed what you said again. It broke up pretty bad.
The article you were referring to, I was just asking if it was written by Pavlina.
I would have to go back and check. It's the one I saw shared actually by the Sanders Institute, and I know Jane Sanders did an interview. That might have been that one.
Stephanie Kelton.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. Yes, she comes on our show. We promote MMT, and that's what she teaches. Oh, so you're familiar with that?
With modern monetary theory?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a cursory understanding, and so I'm familiar with it to an extent, probably more so than the average person, I would say, because I know what it is.
Oh, well, that's good. That's more than most of my guests. That's awesome. And along that line, do you support a federal job guarantee?
So this is something that I've been looking into. So I'm a former legislative aide, and I really do want to see the specific legislation that Senator Sanders is working on. I want to read the bill. I think there is a lot of merit to the idea, especially if it's targeted at what I've been campaigning on, which is climate mobilization, right? World War II initiation or activation of the economy to transition us from fossil fuels to renewable energy as quickly as possible. If it's targeted in that direction, I think it's worth consideration. I fully made up my mind on it. I'm torn between sort of the federal jobs guarantee or a minimum income guarantee, and I guess both of them could live at the same time. But the thing I like about a minimum income guarantee is that it frees people up to be more entrepreneurial, to work for themselves, to seek education, to develop their own practice or their own business. And I do like the freedom of time that affords, and I'm not sure that would be able to do both at the same time. So there is sort of that tension there. But I'm not ready to fully endorse the idea just today, but I'm not totally opposed to it either. I do have to ask the question of, what happens if somebody is not a good employee? So how does that work if they get this guaranteed job and then they don't show up for work, or they're routinely showing up late, or what have you, and then they're not able to maintain that employment? What happens to that person? What's the accountability built into it? Because we want to assume that everybody's going to be great, and I believe in human beings, and I think the vast majority of people would appreciate what they were doing and would do really good work. But there are some parts that are in the details that I want to see, again, addressed in the bill before it's something that I necessarily begin campaigning on. But if it's as part of a civilian conservation corps, climate mobilization type initiative, I see that dovetailing, and maybe they become the same thing. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's a really fair point. Extremely fair. I totally understand that. as far as a UBI, the Universal Basic Income, it works best if it's cohesive with the federal job guarantee. The UBI, when it's been used in other countries, they found, well, first it cancels all other programs. So no one would anymore get Social Security or unemployment or anything. Like, all programs are done. Everybody gets the same amount. And the average is $621 per person. Not too great. So when you implement that with a federal job guarantee, that works better. But the federal job guarantee that's being proposed is totally green involved. It's solar panels, it's infrastructure, it's things like that. So that's definitely, that would be the goal of, getting those jobs. But yeah, you do raise a very fair point of, who is entitled, lack of a better term, to get those jobs. So you also...
Can I go back?
Yeah, sure.
That's why, universal basic income and minimum income guarantee are two different things. And that the points that you make are the reasons why I'm less inclined towards the universal basic income, because I'm not sure why Jeff Bezos needs $600 a month. So what I'm talking about more so is creating an income floor for the American people. It's kind of like what we do with farmers and agricultural workers, is we guarantee a certain return on their product. And it would function something similar to an expansion of the earned income tax credit. But functionally, you could say, and I'm not going to say that these are the specific numbers, but let's just say it's $20,000 a year. If you make less than that, you are brought up to it. And then as you start to make more money, the income guarantee tapers off towards self-sufficiency. But it eliminates one of the biggest problems that we have in our public benefits programs. And this was going to get worse under the recent Farm Bill, which are benefit cliffs. Right, where you have these hard cutoffs for federal benefit programs. They don't taper off. So if you're just under the line, you're getting the benefit and your income. And then you go just over the line and you make a little bit more money, but then you lose the entire benefit. And so people get stuck in these sort of income gaps. And this is a situation where actually I think the Republicans are a little bit right about the problem, but their solution is, let's just get rid of the programs. Or let's throw people off. That way there's no cliffs because there's no programs. And it's like, no, we need to have a gradual transition that exists. There should never be a situation where you make an additional dollar of income and you're losing more than $1 worth of benefits, where improving yourself economically costs you more money. And that's something that we can do. And that's why, doing something like a blanket anti-poverty program that functionally says that in America, we shall not have poverty. If you're making less than the poverty line, you are brought up to it. And then there's, again, the taper off to self-sufficiency. It's also easier to pay for. I think it's $100 or $200 billion a year. I know that paying for things in MMT is not necessarily the way to go, but not everybody's on board with that yet. And we've got to build a 51% coalition. So that's something that I do favor.
Well, it's, MMT really deals with federal, federal taxes don't fund spending. So if you're talking as far as on a state level, it's a different animal. So entirely. I digress, but Christine DeBartolo Pellegrino joined us. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Christine. The Assemblywoman.
She's the best.
We're just over a year anniversary of when I was on Long Island sweating and sleeping 2 hours a night. It was a great campaign.
She's phenomenal. I adore her. And she's kicking ass. She's a true Bernie grad, and she's awesome. Sorry, I digress. I just got excited when I saw her in the comments. So you actually co-founded I would say an organization called North Country Climate Reality.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit about that? What inspired you and the purpose?
So it's a coalition. I'm a co-founder. We work with other folks. It started out with SUNY Plattsburgh at Queensbury, and now it's a partnership between SUNY Plattsburgh at Queensbury and actually Green Mountain College in Vermont. And we do so an annual conference that helps with communication and education, around the climate change issue. And then we do monthly or bi-monthly meetings to check up on progress and try and actually influence local action regarding the climate change issue. I haven't been as intimately involved with it since I became a congressional candidate, but it's work that I've been doing for the last 2 years. I usually lead a communications workshop to talk about, how do we talk to people that aren't already in the choir? How do we have a conversation where we can be persuasive and approach people with empathy, with understanding, with a degree of humility that actually invites, a civilized dialogue that people actually feel comfortable changing their mind, because it can be tremendously uncomfortable to go from one position to another, and you're never going to get that in an adversarial situation. So it's been about 4 years now. I actually was a conference I went to about 4 years ago, and I went to Steve Dana, who was the dean at SUNY Plattsburgh at Queensbury, and I had a whole bunch of unsolicited advice about the climate change conference. And being a true leader, Professor Dana called me up next year and said, "Hey, you got a whole bunch of ideas. How about you help us plan the next conference?" And so he put me to work, and we've been working again. It's education and it's action. One of the conferences we did was like a crowdsource incubator type conference where folks went into groups. They did solution space finding, looking at the problems that were going on in the community, funneled it down, and then came out with some concrete actions that they could take in their local communities or in their lives to try and improve either their personal carbon footprint or improve their community's carbon footprint, or be more effective advocates around the climate change issue. So yeah, it's running strong, and it's it's funny to think back that it's been that long.
That's awesome. Anything to educate people on where we're going to have to go, regardless. Mm-hmm. You also talk about the opioid epidemic, and while that kind of goes with Medicare for all in some respects, can you explain why you put that on your platform and why it's so important to put that on your platform in your district?
Well, we're being hit really hard by it in the 21st. This is a rural community. We have unemployment rates next to twice the national average. Our average income is about $27,000. So we actually do share a lot in common with areas like West Virginia and Pennsylvania and Ohio, the Rust Belt areas where industry had left as a result of globalization and other policy decisions. And we're losing about 65,000 Americans a year to this epidemic, about as many as are dying from gun violence and about as many as that die in car crashes. And it's a result of scientifically illiterate and propaganda-driven policies that we know came out of the Nixon administration as a way of criminalizing their political opposition. Really cynical stuff. And I talk about it because it's an issue in the district. It comes from the fact that you knock on doors and people are talking about it. It has touched the lives of many people that I've talked to. We have a number of folks in our campaign that are in recovery, and they have been so courageous as to share their stories and what they've gone through and what could have been done to be more effective. So that's why I favor decriminalization, because I've talked to folks in recovery, and when you make addiction, which is a disease, a criminal offense, that negative energy gets internalized. So you're dealing with someone that's already in a very vulnerable state, that looks in the mirror and not only sees someone who is an addict, but they're also seeing a criminal. And that stereotype and that negative energy becomes internalized within the addict and makes it much harder for them to seek recovery, because they feel even more isolated from their community. They can't come forward. I mean, nobody feels ashamed about telling people. I mean, actually, I shouldn't say nobody feels ashamed, but You know, if you get cancer, you know, we don't judge that person. You know, we don't bring them down. If you have a flu, you know, we ask people to get better. But when you have addiction, all of a sudden, there's a huge segment of the population that likes to use you as a punching bag and someone to feel superior to, and that's costing lives. So that's why we need to legalize cannabis. The evidence is in on that. You know, states with legalized cannabis, it's as high as a 30% reduction in overdose and hospitalizations. So this isn't a joke issue about people want to get high. Every day we go that we don't legalize cannabis, we are costing lives. People are dying in the opioid epidemic. And, you know, with Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General, we're facing even more death. And I put this into, not that this is a policy proposal, but to think about it for a second. The annual budget of the Drug Enforcement Agency is about $2 billion. The average cost of opioid addiction treatment, now I know there's issues with recidivism, or not recidivism, but relapse and all that kind of stuff, but let's say the average cost is about $30,000. You divide $2 billion by 30,000, you get about 65,000. So the resources are treat this as a healthcare issue. And that's what's going to be effective. That's what Portugal did when they dealt with their opioid crisis, which they went opposite of the war on drugs model. And of course, we should know the war on drugs isn't going to work because we tried it with alcohol and prohibition. And what happened? People drank more. People died from poor quality control, right? You get bathtub gin that was methanol instead of ethanol. And you created a funding source for organized crime. We're seeing the same thing in the opioid epidemic. Addiction rates are higher. Abuse rates are higher. People are dying from overdose, oftentimes not because of heroin, but because of fentanyl being laced into the heroin, so you don't have quality control. And we've got a funding source for organized crime. Now it's gangs as opposed to mafia, but it's the same thing. It's the war on drugs is a big part of the gun violence issue. The 65,000 people that are dying there is this irresponsible policy that we have to break away from. No matter how much, you know, it got beaten to our heads in DARE class, you know, and I approach this as a biochemist, right? So this is what my training was in. And the dividing line that exists between legal and illegal substances makes absolutely no scientific sense. Those that are permissible, those that are impermissible, is not based on any kind of chemistry or any kind of science that I can find. I mean, the fact that cannabis is considered a high potential for addiction and low medicinal value. Give me a break. It's high medicinal value and low potential for abuse. They've got it absolutely backwards. And yet we have an attorney general that thinks no good people have ever smoked marijuana. I really want to see what's in his record collection because he shouldn't be allowed to listen to the Beatles.
Yeah, that's so true. I don't think he's that cool, though. He probably doesn't. He plays it backwards and hears Satan or something. Do you also support, I know a lot of my candidates not only just want to legalize cannabis, but they want to their records to be retroactive as well.
So, yes, this is a situation where the government got it wrong. Okay? The law was wrong. The people were not. When the government gets it wrong, it needs to make amends. And that means, yes, we need to expunge all those records. That's why I would support the Marijuana Justice Act in Congress. This is Senator Gillibrand, Senator Booker's bill that does expungement. It does legalization. And it also puts funding pressure on the states to stop the continuation of this scientifically illiterate and dangerous policy. So it's not just saying, hey, leave it to the states. No, it's ironically enough, right? The same mechanism that existed that not forces states, but incentivizes states to have a 21-year-old drinking age, right? There's federal highway funding that's tied up. If you have a lower drinking age, you lose some of that funding. It uses that same mechanism to say to states, hey, you're going to lose some funding if you continue prohibition on cannabis. And that's what we need to do because it's bad policy at the state level. And the science is in, and if you want to continue this propaganda-driven war, we're not going to pay for it.
Right, and how many states are legalized now? I think it's 13. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong. But they're seeing their economy booming. They're seeing crime going down. It's not like there's no example you know what I mean, for the reasons to do this. So what is something we haven't discussed on your platform? Because I think women's rights. I did have that down as well. You do support Planned Parenthood, you said. What else?
Okay, I want to talk about that for a minute, actually. Because I'm not going to say who it was, but we were filling out, it seems to be this week, we're getting all kinds of surveys. By the way, for endorsements and all that kind of stuff, fill out our questionnaire. By the way, if we haven't gotten to yours yet, I'm sorry, we're doing them as quickly as we can.
We
but
don't
it
do
asks the question.
Here, so.
No, I'm talking, if anybody watching out here is waiting on a survey from us, we're working on them. But one of the question was, do you support the continued federal funding of Planned Parenthood? And it was a yes or no. And I didn't answer it because the question is accepting the Republicans' frame on the issue. Sure. What they want when they say defunding Planned Parenthood, they want you to think that the federal government just takes this big chunk of money and hands it over to Planned Parenthood every year. And they're going to cut that money because why should we just be handing money to a nonprofit? But that's not how it works. It's about reimbursement through Medicaid. And when they say they want to defund Planned Parenthood, they want to deny the ability of Medicaid patients to use Planned Parenthood for what are already non-abortive procedures. So I will protect the right of every patient, including those on Medicaid, to choose Planned Parenthood. And I want to make that point because this is one of the things we have to do as progressives, and we have to do is stop accepting the Republican frame on the issue. Like, we shouldn't say the words right to work. I call it wrong for worker. It's protecting Medicaid patients' right to use Planned Parenthood. We have to stop using their phrases and their frame on the issue, because if you allow the other side to set the frame, they've already won more than half the battle, and we have to be the ones in charge of the frame and then in charge of the dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, I support that. On the issue of abortion, I consider myself against forced birth. The Congresswoman Elise Stefanik thinks that the government should, at the point of a gun, compel a woman to carry a pregnancy to term that she doesn't want to. And I don't want to see government violence in the delivery room or between you and your doctor. So let's get the government out of that decision, and let's let the people closest to that situation, the doctors and the woman, the parents, to make those decisions. I have no business influencing your decision about what you do with your body, and it's something that's a fundamental right.
And does the same person support the children once they're here, or is she just pro-birth and that's it?
Yeah, exactly. You're born, now get a job.
Exactly.
It's or the people that are supposedly pro-life but they support the death penalty. It's or people that consider themselves patriots, but then they support, I'll put it to you this way. I think what the NFL did is incredibly disrespectful to the flag and to the Constitution and to the veterans. Forced patriotism is not patriotism, right? And if you actually stand for the values of this country, you stand for freedom, you stand for freedom of expression. I think we've lost a little bit of what it actually means to be an American, and we've idolized symbols without recognizing what those symbols are supposed to mean and supposed to represent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very fascist to tell someone they have to obey and do something like that. What is I know you said that there are a few people in your race who still take corporate money. What are some other differences, especially I would say in your party running?
So let me make a correction. Nobody in our Democratic primary as of yet have taken money from corporate PACs or lobbyists, but there are two Democratic candidates that have not explicitly said that they wouldn't. So I want to be fair to everybody. There's nobody that has actually done it, but the question is, are you leaving the door open, or do you have the political courage to recognize our broken political system and shut the door on that influence before they can even come calling? To say to a corporate PAC or to a lobbyist, don't get my number, lose my number, don't call me, I'm not doing it. And that's what we should be expecting from our leaders, not to wait until the last possible moment and then make that decision, but to say, no, here's who I am, here's what I'm about, and I'm going to be a leader on this issue.
Right on. Absolutely. If there's something you want to leave our viewers with to inspire them to check out your website or recommend your campaign to people, who live in your district, what have you, or even throw you a few dollars
Yes.
donations.
Yeah, we're breaking up a little bit, but
Oh, I'm sorry. What do you want to leave our viewers with to inspire them to recommend you or to vote for you? Poop. We were doing so well. Okay, I can hear you now. Did you hear what I asked? If you can hear me, just click out and click back in. Thank you, Mark. Oh, now I see you. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. I was asking what would you like to leave with the viewers to inspire them to check you out more, to vote for you, or to recommend you?
Well, one of the original ideas that we have that I want to share, and I'm excited about this because I'm stealing it from my own grandfather, is a 3-part plan on Social Security. And I know that it was recently in the news that there's some solvency issues. So number one is we have to start putting money back into the trust fund that was borrowed out, so that there's more money there. Instead of a $1.5 trillion tax break for billionaires, let's improve the funding of Social Security. And that's important for what's coming later. Number two, let's scrap the cap on contributions. There shouldn't be any special treatment for the wealthy and the powerful in regards to Social Security. So if you're making over $128,400, you should be paying into Social Security just like everybody else. All incomes should be subject to Social Security. But the original idea, and the thing that I want to talk about is, so I'm from New York State. We have one of the best funded pension programs. Where did I lose? Where did I lose you?
Oh, there we go. You're back.
Where was I?
You were on 3.
I was on 3. Okay, so we're in the state of New York with one of the best funded and managed pension programs in the entire country, and that's because the state of New York has something unique. We have an independently elected comptroller who works for the people and is not accountable to anybody except the people of New York. I want to do the same thing for Social Security. We should have an independently elected official, call it the comptroller of the United States, if you will, that manages the Social Security Trust Fund on our behalf. And that way, when Congress and the president want to dip their hands into our retirement, we have somebody down there to slap their hands away and say, no, get your grubby hands off the people's money. And then with that independent management, we can diversify the trust fund across the country. Instead of just investing in treasury bonds, we can invest in Flint, Michigan's bonds to help pay for their water systems. We can invest in bonds in California and diversify it across the country, get a better rate of return for those investments, but also fix some of the problems around here instead of just investing in treasury bonds that have very little yield and let Congress spend that money how they want. Again, that's one of the ideas that I've been championing, because Congress and the president have enough to do, and we should have somebody else managing our retirement, and we should solidify Social Security as a right, and that's one way to do it. And that way, if somebody's not doing a good job with it, we know exactly who to blame, because when there's problems with Social Security, Congress kicks the can to the president kicks the can to the Congress, and the Congress members blame each other and the other party. If we have somebody independently elected, not by the Electoral College, but by every American, if there's a problem with benefits, if there's a problem with yield, we know who to hold accountable. And I think that that's a better solution moving forward. So that's one of the ideas I'm running on.
Okay, some of my teammates are putting some links and all kinds of stuff. There are definitely some comments as well. A few people voting for you, a few people giving you props. So definitely, check out the comments then afterwards. Do you want to give your website and Twitter and all that fun stuff?
Well, it's nelsonfornewyork.com. So if you go to nelsonforny.com, that's our website. There is a donate button in the top right corner. And if you scroll down, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and we're trying to do Snapchat, though I'm not that great at keeping up on it, and I'm going to try and do more. But if we get more followers on there, I'll post more snaps.
Okay, awesome. And for those watching or sharing, I do want to remind you guys the New York primary is the 26th of June, so that is right around the corner. Tomorrow, as I stated, I do have Congressman Ro Khanna coming back. We're going to have a great discussion, I'm sure we did last time. He's coming on at 1:30 in the afternoon Eastern. He's a little busy, so I gotta take him while I can get him. And then Friday night, I have Las Vegas candidate Ruben De Silva. He's a Bernie crowd that's kind of blowing up in Vegas area, so I'm looking forward to him as well. Yes, I had Chris Robb on actually because I'm in Pennsylvania. So I'm just reading the comments. Thank you guys for watching. As always, hopefully I will see you again tomorrow. Also, if you guys have any suggestions for candidates who I haven't had on, I know I'm approaching 100, so I've had a lot on. But if you have any suggestions, always feel free to hit me up or to hit up Real Progressives, and I'll look into them. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining us, Patrick. I wish you the best of luck with your campaign, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Joy. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.